All right, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'na wa anfa'na bima 'allamtana innaka sami'un mujibud du'a. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min 'ilmin la yanfa' wa qalbin la yakhsha' wa min nafsin la tushba' wa min du'a'in la yusma'. Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana ba'da idh hadaytana wa hab lana min ladunka rahma innaka antal wahhab. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. All right, Bismillah. So today's topic is the ideal Muslim parents, okay? Obviously, Muslim parents are a huge part of this deen because they are the ones that are raising the ummah, raising the future generation of Muslims. So it's very important that we talk about what the responsibilities are. So there is an ayah in the Quran that tells us, in Surah Al-Kahf, that tells us that wealth and children are adornments of this world, or like the things that make us happy in this world, right? Bring us joy. And so just like that, obviously, children can be a source of joy for parents, right? They can be a source of companionship. But on the flip side, if we don't do a good job in raising them, they can actually be a source of stress and a source of problems, right? So there is a hadith that tells us that each of us is a shepherd, and we're responsible for our own flock. And what that essentially is saying is that everybody plays a role of leadership in their home. So a father is the head of his family, so he's in charge and he's responsible for his flock, his family, right? And the mother is the same. The mother is in charge of the household and she's in charge of her children. And so we have a responsibility that we're going to be held accountable for when it comes to how we took care of our children and how we raised them. So we understand this great level of responsibility. We understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed this on us with the expectation that we are going to put in our best effort to instill good characters in our kids. So that includes obviously providing them with a solid education, right? Making sure that they're educated both in worldly education as well as Islamic education. We raise them with good character. We utilize the best parenting methods we can to raise our kids, right? And we treat sons and daughters equally. There's no discrimination between the kids or between genders. We make sure that we treat both of them with the same level of affection and care. And there is a poet, I believe, that said that righteousness comes from Allah and good manners comes from the parents, right? So we'll start with the father. They do have a lot of overlap, the mother and father, on what their expectations are, but there's some slight nuances that are different. So with the father, it's really important to emphasize this because I think in culture we lose this quite a bit, is the father needs to understand the psychology of his children, and he needs to be very involved in family life. He needs to be friends with his kids. He needs to be very loving, very affectionate, hugging his kids, kissing his kids, getting to know his kids, coming down to their level, playing with them. You know, it's really important for him to create this very loving, happy environment where his kids feel safe around him, they feel connected to him, they feel like they can open up to him. And unfortunately, what we notice in a lot of cultures is that this gets lost because for some reason they think that, oh, for the father, he has to be this authority figure that everybody's afraid of and scared to approach, which is not Islamic at all, actually on the contrary. And so the author talks about that when you raise children with fear, right? It's a temporary obedience. And once they get out of your control, they're going to go do whatever they want because they were just afraid of you. You know, you weren't someone that they held near and dear. Whereas I think we talked about this before in another class. We talked about the two types of fear that are mentioned in the Quran. You have khawf, which is like the genuine fear of punishment. And then you have khushu'a. Khushu'a is the fear that I don't want to disappoint you. You're someone I love so much that I don't want to disappoint you. So this is the kind of fear you want your children to have, where they are so connected to you, so close to you. They're afraid of seeing you upset with them or seeing you sad with them, not because they're afraid you're going to do something to them, but because you mean so much to them. So that's how we should be leading our households. And there's quite a few ahadith that are mentioned that talk about how the Prophet ﷺ was very affectionate with kids. He would kiss and hug all the kids he would see. He had his two grandchildren, Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein. He'd play with them. He was very affectionate with them. Obviously, he was very affectionate with his own children as well. And he would constantly demonstrate this love and affection. I remember there is a story or a hadith where one time the Prophet ﷺ was playing with either Al-Hassan or Al-Hussein, not sure which one. And when he was praying, he was leading the prayer, and then one of the boys crawled on top of his back. And he was in sujood and he stayed there for quite a while. And afterwards, people commented and they said, why did you stay down for so long? And he said, one of the kids was on my back. I didn't want to disturb him. You know, I wanted to let him until he got off. Then I waited. So that's just how patient he was. I mean, even in prayer, he said, I'm going to let the child do what the child needs to do, right? So he was very, very loving in that way. And like I said, fathers have to be soft, affectionate, you know, kiss your kids, hug your kids. And the idea is that you want to instill confidence in your children. You want them to grow up with optimism and high self-esteem. And that comes from you raising them and praising them and making them feel cared for. The Prophet ﷺ set a lot of examples for this. With his own daughter, Fatima radiallahu anha, every time she would enter the room, he would stand up, he would greet her, he'd kiss her, and he'd sit her down in his spot. And obviously she would do the opposite. She would do the same, as well, when he would walk into a room. So there's just this very sweet loving language between them, right? And so we need to make sure that we're doing this ourselves. There was a man that one time witnessed the Prophet ﷺ kissing one of the kids, I think, and he essentially said, well, I don't kiss any of my kids. He said, what can I do for you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took all the mercy out of your heart? I'm sorry that you're like, and that's him essentially saying, like, to be a merciful person, you should be showing love and affection to your kids. And then this is something that a husband does because he's the provider of the family, the father, I'm sorry. He spends generously on his children. So he's responsible for them financially, but he overly spends on them. He buys them what they need, right? And anything he spends on his wife or his children is considered charity. It's considered sadaqah. So definitely a beautiful thing for him to do. And again, knocking off cultural stigma here, there is a great reward in raising daughters. So there's quite a few ahadith where the Prophet ﷺ tells people, if you manage to raise, he usually says 3 daughters. If you manage to raise 3 daughters successfully, you're guaranteed paradise. And someone approached him and said, well, what about 2 daughters? He said 2 daughters as well. So the idea is what? Daughters carry a great blessing. Unfortunately, during those times, there was a lot of sadness in having daughters. People thought, sons are the only ones worth having. Absolutely not. There's a huge reward in raising good Muslim daughters. And then you treat all your children equally with affection and spending. And one of the greatest stories we have in our religion that teaches us about this is the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. His siblings acted out the way they did purely out of jealousy, purely out of the fact that they felt that there was a difference in love from their father to Yusuf alayhi salam between them. So that was just pure jealousy between siblings. So we have to be very careful and learn from these stories that we should treat our kids equally. And the father sets a good example, right? He shows them how to be a good Muslim by being a good Muslim, right? So the example you set in the home is very important. That's why when we talked about last week, choosing a spouse, you have to be careful with who you choose because that person is going to set the example for your kids. I can't have a husband who doesn't pray and then tell my children, well, you need to pray. Forget about what dad's doing. No, the dad is the one who sets the example. Of course, mom also sets an example, but you're the one who's going to teach them how to be respectful, how to be kind to other people, how to have good manners, how to be charitable. They're going to watch you doing these things. And as a father, you should be taking your kids through these experiences so they can see you enacting it so that they grow up learning how to do this stuff. You're very alert to anything that may have influence on your children. So again, there's no such thing as a disconnected parent. You need to be involved. You need to know who your kids are friends with. What are they talking about at school? What do they do on social media? And it's not in a way to be invasive of their privacy. The idea is you should be close enough with your kids, be a friend to them, that you can see where there could be potential, either good influence or bad influence, right? And it's your job to sort of navigate them through that gently and ensure that they're being protected. So whatever they're reading, whatever they're watching, you need to be very highly alert. Unfortunately, I've seen parents where they're just kind of in la-la land. They don't know who their kids are spending time with. They don't know what their kids are doing in their room with the doors closed. And again, it's not to create an invasion of privacy, but to have this open dialogue between you and children where they're comfortable enough to share that with you, right? And you have to make sure that you keep them straight, but in a gentle fashion. Don't be too harsh, don't be too stern, but at the same time, make sure that you ensure that your kids are, doing the right thing and following the right path. And remember that your children are future community members. So we are raising the future ummah. So what you raise your kids to be is who they're going to be out in the real world. So please don't raise sucky people for us to have to deal with in the future, right? No, you want to raise good people, strong people, helpful people, loving people, charitable people. So now we'll go to the mother. So the mother is almost the same, it's very much the same, but the mother naturally in Islam, because we have the role of the father being the full-time provider, naturally the mom is usually going to be the one spending the most time with the kids. And the environment that she creates at home is very important because the environment is sort of like a mini setup of society. It's like a micro society. So you're raising your kids as personalities, you're forming their behavior so that when they go out into the world, this is the person that they're going to be. So it's very important that the mom is also very aware of her children's behaviors, emotions, feelings, experiences, right? She needs to be close with them. She's very responsible for their development, right? And she helps form their mind and personality. She's very involved in their education. And we have to remember we talked about how the women have a lot of responsibility in Islam. It's because we are the mothers of the ummah. And there are so many great women in history that raised some of the greatest men we have. So one example of that is Imam al-Shafi'i. His mom raised him, right? I think his father died when he was an infant. So this is just one of the greatest scholars we have, raised purely by a woman. So women do play a big role in raising the children. Again, she's super loving and affectionate with them. She plays with them just like the father does, right? Brings them up with warmth, ambition, instill confidence and self-esteem in your kids. You give them security. You do tell them, you guide them and you direct them, but not harshly, right? You're very gentle with them. You're very sweet with them. And you have a very nurturing nature as a mother. And this one is for the mom because unfortunately, for some reason, it seems like the moms fall into this a lot. Don't make dua against your kids, okay? sometimes women, moms will get emotional, they get frustrated, and they might slip. The book is telling us that you have to be very, very wary with this. You don't know if your dua will be accepted. Inshallah, if it's bad, it doesn't get accepted. But the reality is that you have to be very wary. If your kid is troubling you, make dua for them. Inshallah, may Allah open doors for them. You want your kids to be successful. You don't want to see their downfall. No mom actually wants to see their kid go to Jahannam. And I think there was a hadith one time where there was a young man who passed away, and his mother was angry with him. And the Prophet ﷺ told her, like, can you forgive him so we can bury him? And she said, no, I refuse to forgive him. He goes, okay, let's just throw him into the fire then. So may as well. And she was like, no, 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 no. He said, okay, so you're going to forgive him? She said, I'll forgive him. And the idea is what? Is that she was so angry, but the reality is no one actually wants to see their kids go to hell. So please be wary of that. Make sure you don't pray against your children. Make dua for them, if anything. Again, she's also very alert about the things that could influence them. She's paying attention to what they read, who they hang out with, all of that, right? Very involved. You're compassionate, and you're patient, right? And then again, you are it's said that the mom is the first teacher and she's the best teacher, like I said, because you're spending the most time with your kids. You are essentially the person that's going to teach them about life before they go out into the world. So it's very important to take that responsibility seriously. And alhamdulillah, I think that is all we have for today. Any comments or questions? I brought the second microphone today. So if you want, yes, let me hand it over to you. Just make sure it's connected. Yes. Okay, here you go.
I just wanted to find out what du'as are there to say, you know, for your children.
For your children?
So that they would be guided and,
yeah,
you know, when they're not in your presence, you know,
yeah,
what's good du'as, you know.
Allah yahdihum. So I don't know if there's anything specific, Sheikh Shams, that you would recommend as a du'a that you could make for your kids. I don't know if there's like a special one.
I don't know of a special
yeah.
To be guided into the path.
The thing with dua, I think the thing with dua is ideally it should be our own thoughts, our own.
Right. I didn't know.
Because often we recite duas in the hadith.
Right.
I can't think of an ayah that I can't think of a text that really a direct answer to that question.
But you know,
make up your own
We
dua.
could just make.
I was gonna say, yeah, you just raise your hands up and say exactly
Okay. Perfect.
in your own language. It doesn't even have to be in
That
Arabic,
works.
right?
Yep.
So yeah, alhamdulillah.
That's
Awesome. Anything else? Any comments, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't.
No, he's fine. All right. All right. So if we're done, I'll go ahead and do the closing dua. Subhanallah bihamdik nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam Muhammad. Bismillahir wal 'asr. Innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr.